Hello, and welcome to this lesson on Power BI, where we will connect this Access database, which contains the list with various data of the 8,000 Italian municipalities, with Sharepoint. And then we will synchronize Sharepoint with Power BI to then obtain all our operations there, in terms of data modeling, in terms of tables and charts. We will make this transition through Sharepoint because Sharepoint will then give us the opportunity to build flows, which is not possible through Access with Power Automate, so that we can receive alerts when something changes on the Sharepoint list, therefore automatic alerts when there are changes within the Sharepoint list. So first, let's open the Access database, which contains this single table where all the municipalities of Italy are listed, with an ID, ISTAT code, and the name of the municipality, the number of inhabitants, the province, the region, the email, the certified email, the phone, and the fax. So the first thing to do is to synchronize this database with this single table with Sharepoint. So we go here in Database Tools. We click on Sharepoint, that is Connect with Sharepoint. We choose a database site where to connect this Access database. I choose this one, Training Courses, anyone will do. I click on Next, and at this point, the synchronization operations begin. We are at 33%, but surely now it will take a while because it is a list of 8,000 rows. So I will stop this recording here because I don't want to bore you with the explanation. And then we will see each other again as soon as it has completed the operations. Here, the operations have been regularly concluded. And now we have a yellow table, no longer gray like the table icon in Access, because indeed, the data now resides on Sharepoint. This is just a link, so it is not a table inside Access, but it is a table inside Access, synchronized with Sharepoint. Obviously, I can open it from here, and all the changes that I might make here from Access, they will be reflected on Sharepoint and vice versa. And once we have synchronized Sharepoint with Power BI, it will mean that by making a change not only from Sharepoint, but also from here from the Access file, this change will also be reflected in the tables and charts of Power BI. And then we will ensure with a flow of information that will refer us to this change. So Power Automate will make all this happen automatically, in the sense that when we make a change, either directly from Sharepoint or here from Access, which is reflected in Sharepoint, automatically triggers the change in Power BI as well, and perhaps also notifies someone that a data point has been modified. So here in Access, we can go ahead and close. We find ourselves on the Microsoft 365 administration interface, and let's make a change. Let's go to Sharepoint, take that Training Courses site where we synchronized Access. Let's go here to the gear icon, Site Content. We need to go look for that list of municipalities in Italy. So let's see where it is. Here it is, municipalities. And as you can see, here is the list of all 8,000 municipalities that we have synchronized through Access. Now it is also present here in Sharepoint. Let's also perform an operation, copy the internet address of this Sharepoint list, and create a button here in the menu. We click on More. We paste the internet address that we have copied, and we write municipalities. We click on OK. Down here, we click on Save. And now, wherever we are, for example, here on this other page of the course program site, we could return here in Common, and from the tree menu, return through this link that we have set in our Common list, in our Common Sharepoint list. So now let's synchronize everything with Power BI. So we go here in the Windows, we write Power BI Desktop, then we We use it from the desktop, we wait for it to open, and once opened, we will create a new report. By synchronizing this list, so we click here on New. At this point, Power BI asks us, what is the data source from which we want to create the report? So we will say, since Sharepoint here, there is not even access. Retrieve the data from another source because the sources can be verified, many. And as you can see, these are all the data sources from which you can fill a table in Power BI. So you could also do it from Access. Let me show you how to do it. I click here on Access Database as a data source. Connect at this point, I go to look for that. Data source, common databases, Power BI receives it. I still haven't done anything. So I won't tell it to do this because we said we want to do it with Sharepoint. I go to select the Access table from which I want to retrieve the data, and then click on Load. But we said that at the moment, we don't want to do it because we want to synchronize with Sharepoint. Because Sharepoint will then give us that very important possibility to create a flow in Power Automate that every time a data is modified in Sharepoint, or even from Access. So the table in Sharepoint is automatically updated, and therefore everyone, all the charts and pivot tables in Power BI without performing the operation manually, because obviously that can also be done. So here I go back, close, retrieve data from another source, and go to look for not a Sharepoint folder, but click on Add. And I have to look for Sharepoint list, Sharepoint, here it is, connect. At this point, it asks me for the site URL, the Sharepoint site address. So I go back here to the Sharepoint site, and I have to copy up to here. This is the title of the Sharepoint site training courses. So not also after what is written after this slash from Islam, common, etc. Up to the course title, I copy, go back to Power BI, paste the site URL, Sharepoint, where the list I want to connect to Power BI is located. Click on OK. It tells me to connect to the Sharepoint site. I say connect here. It tells me that it was not possible. I go to select my Microsoft account, connect the access to the Sharepoint site was not performed. I access. These are all the small inconveniences. That can occur when doing these things. The address of the Sharepoint site is this one here. Connect, and now it is connecting to my Sharepoint site, or more precisely, to my Sharepoint environment specifically, then to that site from which I want. Derive the list to synchronize with Power BI. So I go to choose the list of municipalities. I put a check mark. Now it already shows me the Sharepoint list as a preview, and I go to click on Load. At this point, it will start the loading operations, and in the end, it will present me with the table with all the municipalities. Now, at the end of this lesson, we will clearly see the table that is perfectly structured like the table in Access, like the Sharepoint list. At the end of this lesson, we will plan what we will do in the next one, so let's anticipate it right away, because then we can say that when the data has been loaded, the lesson can be considered concluded in the Pro. There it has loaded everything. Let's take the table. This is the municipalities table, as you can see. Here are all the fields from which we can then create tables and charts. So now in the next lesson, first of all, we will use a Power Automate flow to ensure that when we modify a data from Access or from SharePoint, this change is directly reflected here on Power BI without having to do it manually, because you could click here and then click on Refresh. It happens automatically. Obviously, this is a very simple list, but there could be more complex data management lists. So first of all, we will make sure that this happens automatically, and then we will go on to build some reports in Power BI, where I will show you how to create them. The tables and reports within these Power BI dashboards, how can the reports within these dashboards be created? How can the reports within these Power BI dashboards be created? How can the reports within the reports, the tables, the charts of reports within the reports, the tables, the charts of reports within the reports, the tables, the charts of various types that can be created? How various types that can be created as you can see here. There are many objects on which you can see here. There are many objects on which you can see here. There are many objects on which to model the data. And so we will see how with some to model the data. And so we will see how with some model the data. And so we will see how with simple data, which are those of the municipalities, simple data, which are those of the municipalities. Because then to understand how these applications work, you always have to start from simple things and not from complex things. We will go to build tables and charts within a report that will already be related to each other, because Power BI will have already built the pivot relationships without having to write complex and laborious macros as we would have to do in Excel. Then we will perform the last operation, which is to save the work we have done, to give a name to our list, Power BI Municipalities of Italy, save. And then at this point, we could also publish our work one day when we have done everything in Power BI Web. Indeed, let's do it right away, even if we haven't made the charts yet, but we can publish it anyway, since we will overwrite it as we make changes. So publish it. We publish it in our personal workspace. Obviously, on the other side, in the Power BI administration environment, we can create other thematic workspaces. Select, and at this point, Power BI saves this model. In the personal workbook, having done this, we can say that we have finished, we can close, we have completed all the operations, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Bye.